Hello everyone, my name is Billy and welcome to my presentation for Unit 6 for our ethics course. Today I will be exploring prostitution as a moral dilemma through the lens of Kantian deontology, a moral theory rooted in duty, rationality, and respect for human dignity. This presentation will cover the basics of deontology, introduce you to Immanuel Kant and his key ideas, and explain the three formulations of the categorical imperative. We'll then apply these principles to a real-world scenario, which is prostitution, particularly cases where women are driven into poverty, into it by poverty, trauma, or social pressure. Finally, I'll share some ethical reflections and wrap up with a brief conclusion. So what is deontology? This is a moral theory that focuses on doing one's duty. Unlike utilitarianism, which judges actions by their outcomes, deontology asks, did you follow a moral rule? For instance, if a person lies to protect someone, deontology may still consider this action wrong because honesty is a moral duty. So in this theory, intentions matter more than consequences. So who is Immanuel Kant and what are some of his ethics? So Kant is an 18th century philosopher. He believed that moral laws should come from reason, not from feelings or external rewards. He proposed the categorical imperative, a principle that applies to everyone at all times, no matter the situation. To Kant, the moral worth of an action comes from doing it out of duty, not because it feels good or brings benefits. Kant gave us three formulations of the categorical imperative to test if an action is moral. The first one is universal law, which states that you should act only on rules you'd want everyone to follow. The second one, humanity as an end, which states that you should treat others as ends in themselves, never just as tools. And the third and last, kingdom of ends, that has us act as if your maxims shape the moral laws of a community. So we'll try to apply each of these three to the topic of prostitution. Right, so let's consider women who enter prostitution not out of choice, but due to poverty, abuse, or trauma. Some do it to feed their children, or to school them, or even to shoulder the burden of their extended families. And others may have been introduced to it as teenagers or manipulated by traffickers. Some, as extreme as it seems, as it may sound, may even use prostitution to retaliate. So some women could have been infected with HIV some time back, and so they choose to spread it in anger just to get back at someone, not putting in mind that it was just one man who did it. So they end up infecting a whole lot of people in the society. So each person has a reason, right? But the moral question is, do these reasons justify the action? So let's try to apply the universal law. So let's say the maxim is it is acceptable to engage in prostitution because it will help someone meet their personal or family needs. Now, the question that we should ask ourselves is, what if everyone acted this way? The society would normalize treating the body as a commodity where intimacy and dignity are bought and sold. According to Kant, this leads to a contradiction in will. You cannot consistently will a world where this is universal, yet expect others to treat you with dignity. Therefore, prostitution will fail this test. Now, on humanity as an end, this principle demands that we treat others and ourselves as beings with inherent worth, not as tools. Let's look at both sides. If clients pay for sex purely for pleasure, they are reducing the sex worker to an object. If the sex worker provides the service only for money without any respect for connection, they may also be using the client as a means. In both cases, the human dignity of at least one party is compromised. Kant will say this violates the duty to treat all humans as ends in themselves. Kingdom of ends. So imagine a moral community made up of rational individuals who create and follow laws that respect one another. Will such a community legislate prostitution, especially when it stems from economic desperation or past trauma? Kant would argue no. A moral society must aim for justice, support, and mutual respect, not one where people must sell their bodies to survive. Thus, prostitution contradicts the moral standards of kingdom ends. Now, here's where things get a bit complicated. Kantian ethics lacks emotional flexibility. It doesn't consider how desperate someone might be or how few options they have. Yet it pushes the society to do better. Kant doesn't just say prostitution is wrong. He implies it's the society's duty to create conditions where no one has to choose this path. So instead of judging the individuals, Kantian ethics calls us to reform the systems that fail them. So to wrap up this discussion, Kantian deontology teaches us to act from moral duty, not just for results. Prostitution, second note, prostitution, when examined under all three formulations of the categorical imperative, is morally impermissible. However, the third one, the blame doesn't fall solely on the women involved. It falls on us, on our institutions, and on the societal structures that fail to protect and uplift them. Kant reminds us that every human being matters, not as a tool, not as a statistic, but as an end in themselves. So, of course, this presentation drew heavily from Matthews and Hendricks' Introduction to Philosophy and Ethics and Kant's groundwork for the metaphysics of morals. Thank you very much for listening, and I welcome you to a discussion based on the presentation that I've just made. I would like to hear your reflections. Thank you very much and all the best.